Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. This week, we're taking a look at all the happenings in cybersecurity for the week of February 2025.
Sounds exciting.
Oh, it is, yeah.
Yeah.
We've got a whole bunch of news articles plus a security podcast to dig into. And let me tell you, things are getting kind of wild out there.
No.
Yeah, we've got government websites basically acting like open books, a big old fight between the US and the EU about AI regulations, and there's even some shady stuff going on with demands for backdoors into our tech.
So a pretty standard week in cybersecurity then.
Haha, yeah, pretty much. But I think what's really interesting this time around is how all these stories, which seem kind of separate at first, actually tell a bigger story about like the growing tension between security and privacy and how global power dynamics are playing out in the digital world.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It's like all these different threads are weaving together to form a pretty complex tapestry. And the thing is, this isn't just some abstract digital drama playing out in the background. This stuff has real-world consequences that affect all of us.
Exactly. Okay, so let's jump into it. First up, we've got this story about the Department of Government Efficiency. Apparently, they had their website pulling data from a publicly editable database. I mean, can you believe that?
Wow.
It's like transparency gone wrong.
Yeah, that's a pretty major oversight. I mean, it really highlights the balancing act governments and organizations have to do between making information accessible and keeping things secure. The goal of making data easily accessible is, of course, a good thing. But in this case, it definitely created a vulnerability that could have been exploited. I mean, think about the potential impact if someone with malicious intent had decided to manipulate that data. It wouldn't just be some random numbers getting changed. It could potentially have influenced public perception and even skewed important policy decisions.
Right. It's scary to think about. It's not just about hackers stealing data. It's also about them manipulating it to like sow chaos and distrust. Okay, moving on. The U.S. and the EU are, they're basically having a showdown over AI regulations. The U.S. Vice President is calling for the EU to relax its rules, saying that they're putting U.S. businesses at a disadvantage. But the EU is, standing firm, saying that these regulations are necessary to protect data privacy and ensure ethical AI development. What do you make of all this?
Well, I think it boiled down to different priorities. The U.S., with its strong emphasis on innovation and economic growth, sees these strict regulations as a barrier to progress. But the EU, on the other hand, is putting data privacy and ethical considerations front and center. They see strict regulations as a vital safeguard in this rapidly evolving field.
Okay, so basically two different perspectives on how to approach AI development.
Right. And the thing is, the potential impact of this clash is huge. We could end up with a fragmented AI landscape globally, where companies have to navigate a complex web of conflicting rules and standards across different regions. Imagine the logistical nightmare.
Yeah, it sounds like a recipe for confusion and delay. Kind of like back in the day when different countries had different standards for things like TV broadcasting.
Exactly. And this isn't just an economic issue either. This divergence in approaches could have a profound impact on the future of AI itself, influencing research and development, ethical frameworks, and ultimately, how this technology shapes our world.
Okay, so definitely something to watch closely. But hold on, folks, because this next story is where things get really interesting. Apparently, the UK has issued a secret order demanding that Apple provide unlimited access to user data. And as you can imagine, this has caused quite a stir.
Oh, I bet.
It has reignited that whole debate about national security versus individual privacy. I mean, I get it. The UK government probably thinks having access to all this data would be a powerful tool for intelligence gathering and crime prevention. But, at what cost?
Exactly. The potential consequences are pretty huge.
Yeah.
Creating a backdoor like this could compromise the security of millions of users worldwide. It's not just a UK issue. It has global implications.
Right, because once you create a backdoor, who's to say that it won't be exploited by malicious actors down the line? It's like you can't just build a backdoor that only the good guys can use, right? And then there's the whole issue of government overreach. Where do you draw the line between legitimate surveillance and an invasion of privacy?
Yeah, it's a slippery slope. And if Apple is forced to comply with this demand, it sets a dangerous precedent. Other governments could start demanding similar backdoors, and then we're essentially undermining encryption, which is, the foundation of online security. I mean, imagine a world where governments have unfettered access to our digital lives. That's a pretty dystopian thought.
It's kind of terrifying to think about, and it looks like U.S. lawmakers are pretty worried about this too. They're putting pressure on the Director of National Intelligence to oppose this UK order, and are even suggesting that the U.S. might have to rethink its intelligence sharing agreements with the UK if they don't back down.
Wow, so this could have serious diplomatic repercussions as well.
Yeah, it's getting pretty intense. It just shows how these cybersecurity issues can quickly escalate into international disputes with potentially far-reaching consequences.
All right, let's shift gears for a moment to a story that feels like it's straight out of a spy thriller. The U.S. just traded a convicted Russian money launderer for an American teacher who was imprisoned in Russia for possessing medical THC. Now, I'm glad that teacher's back home safe and sound, but this whole prisoner swap thing is, well, it's raising some eyebrows.
Yeah, it's a tricky situation. On the one hand, it's a humanitarian act to bring a citizen home, but this particular swap has sparked a debate about, the ethics and the long-term consequences of these kinds of exchanges. Some people are arguing that this could incentivize other countries to detain Americans, knowing that they can be used as bargaining chips later on.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, is this setting a dangerous precedent?
That's exactly. If countries believe that they can leverage detained individuals, regardless of the crimes they're accused of, to negotiate the release of their own citizens, it creates a dangerous incentive structure. It could lead to a world where people's lives are treated like pawns in a geopolitical game with their freedom being used as a bargaining chip.
That's a scary thought. And, it brings us to another concerning trend we're seeing, and that's the lack of strong cybersecurity leadership within the U.S. government itself. We've got the president nominating a political operative with zero experience in cybersecurity for the position of National Cyber Director. And on top of that, it seems like the Coast Guard doesn't have a solid plan in place to protect our maritime transportation system from cyber threats. I mean, what's going on here?
Yeah, the lack of qualified and experienced individuals in these critical cybersecurity roles is definitely a cause for concern. It's like, imagine trying to perform a complex surgery without a skilled surgeon. Cybersecurity is a specialized field that requires a deep understanding of the technical aspects, as well as the ability to think strategically and anticipate threats. And without the right people at the helm, we're leaving ourselves vulnerable.
Right. It's like putting someone who's never driven a car before behind the wheel of a race car and expecting them to win. It's just not going to happen.
Exactly. And while we're kind of fumbling around here, nation-state actors, particularly those from China and Russia, are continuing to ramp up their cyber operations. We're not talking about random, isolated attacks here. These are coordinated and sophisticated campaigns designed to achieve specific objectives, whether it's stealing sensitive information or disrupting critical infrastructure.
Yeah. For example, there's this Chinese hacking group called Salt Typhoon. They've been exploiting vulnerabilities in Cisco firewalls all over the world. This isn't just about some kids messing around online. This is strategic espionage with the potential to compromise sensitive data on a global scale. And then there's this Russian group, Seashell Blizzard. They've been targeting critical infrastructure like energy grids and transportation systems. And what's really scary is that they're not just going for quick hits, they're establishing persistent access, which means they're essentially laying the groundwork for a potential future attack.
Right. It's a chilling thought. They're playing the long game, infiltrating systems, and biding their time until they're ready to strike. It's a stark reminder that cyber warfare isn't just about stealing data. It's about strategic positioning and maximizing your impact when the time is right.
Wow. And on top of all that, Apple just issued a warning about a sophisticated attack that could potentially target iPhones and iPads. They're urging everyone to update their devices immediately, but they're not giving a lot of details about the nature of the threat.
That's interesting. It's pretty unusual for Apple to be so tight-lipped about security matters. I think the fact that they've issued such a public and urgent warning suggests that they're dealing with something particularly serious. It's almost like they're seeing a tidal wave coming and are yelling, "Run!" without explaining exactly why. This really creates a sense of urgency.
Yeah, it's like, something big is happening, but the lack of information just adds to the anxiety. Okay, let's talk about something that's both fascinating and kind of terrifying, the AI-powered arms race that's starting to heat up in the world of cybersecurity. We've got companies like Google using AI to develop malware and identify vulnerabilities, which raises some pretty big questions about the dual-use nature of this technology.
Yeah, AI is a double-edged sword. It can be a powerful tool for defense, helping us identify and patch vulnerabilities before they're exploited. But it can also be used to create extremely potent malware and launch attacks at a scale and sophistication we've never seen before. It's like we're watching a sci-fi movie unfold in real time. But unlike in the movies, there's no guarantee of a happy ending here.
Right. It feels like we're at a crossroads, and the decisions we make now about how to develop and use AI will have far-reaching consequences for the future of global security. It's not just a technological issue, it's a societal issue, a global issue. And we need to have a serious conversation about the potential benefits and risks of AI, ensuring that it serves humanity and not the other way around. And while all this is happening on the global stage, let's not forget about the vulnerabilities we face closer to home. I mean, unpatched routers, weak passwords, bad cybersecurity habits. These things are exposing millions of people to attacks every day.
That's a good point. Cybersecurity isn't just about nation states and big corporations. It's about each and every one of us taking responsibility for our own digital security. It's about recognizing that we're all part of this interconnected digital ecosystem and that our individual actions have ripple effects. Just like a chain is only as strong as its weakest link, our collective cybersecurity is only as strong as the least secure individual.
Exactly. So how can we empower ourselves and each other to be more cyber aware? What can we do to protect ourselves in this increasingly complex digital world?
Well, that's a great question. Keeping your systems safe is super important as businesses rely more and more on digital systems, and that's where turnkey cybersecurity can really help.
Yeah, we're here to help small businesses just like yours make sure they're safe and sound in this crazy world of cybersecurity. And we offer a whole suite of services specifically tailored for you. So that's ensuring CMMC compliance and doing penetration testing. We also run vulnerability scans, and we can help you develop a comprehensive risk assessment.
And it doesn't stop there, right?
No, it doesn't.
We handle incident response, should the unfortunate happen, and we guide you through migrations like GCC. We just want to make sure your transitions are smooth and that you're secure.
It's all about peace of mind, right? You focus on what you do best, running your business, and we'll make sure that your digital world is safe and sound.
That whole situation with the UK demanding a backdoor into Apple products is pretty murky. There's not a lot of information out there, and the UK law actually prevents Apple from even acknowledging whether this order exists or not.
Yeah, it's like trying to put together a puzzle in the dark with half the pieces missing. But even with what little we do know, it's pretty worrying. Forcing Apple to create a backdoor could potentially make millions of users vulnerable to attacks, not just in the UK, but globally.
Right. It really highlights how interconnected we all are in the digital age. And it raises some interesting questions about how this backdoor would even work from a technical standpoint. Would they be weakening encryption protocols or building in some sort of hidden access point? I mean, whatever the method, the potential for misuse is huge.
Yeah, exactly. Like, who's to say this access wouldn't end up being exploited by hackers or other bad actors down the line? You can't just create a backdoor that only the good guys can use, right? And then there's the whole issue of government overreach. Where's the line between legitimate surveillance and just plain invading people's privacy?
It's a slippery slope, for sure. And if Apple is forced to comply, it sets a really dangerous precedent. What's to stop other governments from demanding similar backdoors from tech companies? I mean, imagine a world where governments have unfettered access to all our data. That's a pretty chilling thought.
It's straight out of a dystopian novel, that's for sure. And U.S. lawmakers are pushing back pretty hard on this. They're urging the Director of National Intelligence to oppose this UK order. And they're even hinting that if the UK doesn't back down, the U.S. might have to reconsider sharing intelligence with them.
Wow, so this is turning into a diplomatic issue as well.
Yeah, it just goes to show how quickly these cybersecurity issues can become international incidents with, potentially huge consequences. Okay, let's switch gears for a bit and talk about that prisoner exchange with Russia. It's a tough situation. You've got an American teacher in prison for having a small amount of medical marijuana, and the U.S. trades a convicted Russian money launderer to get her back. On the one hand, it's great that she's home safe, but on the other hand, it kind of feels like we're rewarding bad behavior, doesn't it?
It definitely raises some difficult questions about the ethics of these kinds of exchanges and what the long-term implications might be. While it's important to bring citizens home, we also have to consider whether this sets a precedent that could encourage other countries to detain Americans, knowing they can be used as bargaining chips later on.
Yeah, is it worth potentially putting other Americans at risk by, almost incentivizing this kind of behavior? It's a tough call.
It really is. And it gets to the heart of some really complex issues in international relations. How do we balance the immediate need to protect our citizens with a long-term goal of discouraging hostage diplomacy? There are no easy answers here.
No, definitely not. And this whole situation kind of ties back into something we talked about earlier, the lack of strong cybersecurity leadership in the U.S. government. We've got a political appointee with no cybersecurity experience running the show, and the Coast Guard doesn't seem to have a good plan for protecting our maritime systems from cyber attacks. It's kind of like, are they not taking this threat seriously?
It is concerning. I mean, cybersecurity is such a specialized field. It's like having a ship without a captain. Or even worse, having someone at the helm who doesn't know how to sail.
Right. And we're talking about a ship that's sailing straight into a hurricane here. We need leaders who not only have the technical skills, but also the vision and experience to anticipate these threats and put effective defenses in place.
Absolutely. Cybersecurity is not just about reacting to attacks. It's about proactively anticipating and mitigating them. And that requires leadership with both a deep understanding of the technology and a strategic mindset.
Totally agree. And while we're over here seemingly struggling to get our act together, nation-state actors like China and Russia are becoming more and more aggressive. They're not just launching random attacks, they're using sophisticated tactics to infiltrate systems and achieve their goals.
We saw that with the Salt Typhoon Group exploiting vulnerabilities in Cisco firewalls. That gave them potential access to sensitive communications all over the world. It just underscores how cybersecurity is not just a tech issue, it's a geopolitical issue with real-world consequences.
It's like we're in a digital Cold War with countries battling it out for control and influence in cyberspace. And it's not just about espionage anymore. We're seeing more and more attacks aimed at disrupting critical infrastructure, like what that Russian group Seashell Blizzard is doing.
Yeah, and that's where things get really scary. Imagine a scenario where a foreign government can just shut down our power grid or cripple our transportation systems. That's the level of threat we're facing now.
It's a chilling thought, and it makes you wonder, are we really prepared to defend ourselves against this kind of sophisticated adversary? Okay, remember that Apple security warning we talked about earlier? The one where they're urging everyone to update their devices but not giving us much information about why.
Yeah, that was weird. It's not like Apple to be so secretive about security issues.
Yeah.
It almost makes me think they discovered something really serious, but they don't want to tip their hand to the attackers by revealing too much.
Right, like they're playing a high-stakes game of poker and trying to protect their cards. It just shows how difficult it is for companies to balance transparency with the need to keep security vulnerabilities under wraps.
Exactly. I think we need to find a better way to communicate about these threats. We need more collaboration between tech companies, the government, and the public so we can share information and work together to mitigate these risks.
Totally agree. Okay, let's wrap up this part of our deep dive by circling back to that AI arms race. Companies like Google are using AI to develop malware and identify vulnerabilities, and it's blurring the lines between offensive and defensive cybersecurity. It's kind of scary to think about, isn't it?
It is. AI is a powerful tool. And like any powerful tool, it can be used for good or for evil. It's like giving a kid a loaded gun. They may not fully understand the potential consequences of their actions, but the damage they can cause is very real. We need to think carefully about the ethical implications of AI and put safeguards in place to prevent its misuse.
Right. We're entering uncharted territory here, and we need to proceed with caution. We need clear ethical guidelines, robust testing procedures, and international cooperation to make sure AI is being used responsibly in the world of cybersecurity. The stakes are just too high to ignore. Okay, so we've talked about espionage, cyber warfare, the potential dangers of AI, but now let's bring it back down to earth for a bit and focus on something a little closer to home, the vulnerabilities we face in our everyday lives.
I think that's a great idea. Cybersecurity is not just about nation states and big corporations. It's about all of us taking responsibility for our own digital security.
Exactly. And in the final part of our deep dive, we'll be talking about some practical things you can do to protect yourself and your family in this increasingly complex digital world. Stay with us.
Okay, so we've really gone deep into some pretty heavy cybersecurity issues this week. Government vulnerabilities, international tensions, AI, backdoors. It's a lot of process, right?
It really is. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, let's focus on what we can control, how we protect ourselves. Right. Knowledge is power. And knowing how to stay safe online is more important than ever. So let's get practical. What are some things people can do to make their home networks more secure? I mean, where do you even start?
Well, I think a good place to start is with your router. It's kind of the gateway to your entire home network. And a lot of people just set it up and forget about it.
Yeah, I'm guilty of that.
You're not alone.
Right.
But a lot of routers come with default passwords and settings, and those are really easy for hackers to exploit. It's like leaving your front door unlocked, basically.
Okay, so step 1, change the default password on your router. Got it. But what makes a good password, I mean, is just changing password 123 to password 456 gonna cut it?
No, definitely not. A strong password is a unique password, and it should be a passphrase, ideally. That means it should be a longer phrase with a mix of upper and lowercase letters, numbers, and symbols. And don't use the same password for multiple accounts. Treat each password like a unique key for a specific lock.
Makes sense. Like, I wouldn't use the same key for my house, my car, and my office, right?
Exactly. And while we're talking about routers, if yours supports it, enable two-factor authentication. It just adds an extra layer of security. So even if someone does get your password, they still can't get into your network without that extra code from your phone or email.
Okay, so strong, unique passwords for every account. Two-factor authentication whenever possible. Check. What else?
Keep your software updated. I know, those update notifications can be annoying, but they often include important security patches that fix vulnerabilities that hackers could exploit.
So basically, ignoring those updates is like playing Russian roulette with your digital security.
Pretty much. Think of software updates as, like getting regular checkups and vaccinations for your devices. They help protect you from all those nasty digital bugs going around.
Okay, so update everything, always. Got it. Anything else I should be doing?
Be careful about phishing attacks. Those are attempts to trick you into giving up sensitive information like your passwords or credit card details. They can come in the form of emails, texts, or even fake websites that look very convincing.
Yeah, those things are so sneaky. How can you even tell if something's legit or not?
It can be tough, but a good rule of thumb is to be skeptical of anything that seems too good to be true or just feels a little off. Never click on links or open attachments from senders you don't recognize, and always double-check the URL of a website before you enter any personal information.
Yeah, I always hover over links before I click them just to make sure they're going where they say they're going.
That's a good habit to have. And look for that little lock icon in the address bar to make sure the website is secure. It also pays to be mindful of what you share online. Oversharing personal information can make you an easy target for cybercriminals.
Right. It's like shouting your vacation plans from the rooftops and leaving your front door wide open.
Yeah. Think carefully about what you post on social media. Avoid sharing things like your home address, phone number, financial details, anything that a hacker could use to target you.
Okay, so be cautious about clicking links, double-check URLs, be smart about what I share online. What about when I'm using public Wi-Fi, like at a coffee shop or the airport? Is that safe?
Public Wi-Fi can be risky because it's often unsecured, which means anyone could potentially snoop on your internet traffic and steal your data. That's where a VPN comes in handy.
VPN? What's that?
Stands for Virtual Private Network. Think of it like this. Imagine sending a letter through a busy public square. Anyone could potentially intercept it and read what you wrote, right? A VPN is like putting that letter in a sealed envelope and sending it through a secure courier service. It creates a private, encrypted tunnel for your internet traffic, making it much harder for anyone to spy on what you're doing.
So basically, it's like wearing a digital disguise when you're out in public.
Yeah.
I like it. All right, what about backups? Are those really necessary?
Backups are essential, absolutely. Having a recent backup of your important data can be a lifesaver if, your computer crashes or you get hit with ransomware or something like that.
Yeah, ransomware's scary stuff. That's where they basically hold your data hostage and demand money to get it back, right?
Exactly. But if you have a backup, you can just wipe your computer clean and restore your files from the backup without having to pay the ransom. It's like having a spare key for your house.
Yeah.
If you lose the original, you're not locked out forever.
Great analogy. Okay, so to recap, strong passwords, two-factor authentication, software updates, watch out for phishing, use a VPN on public Wi-Fi, and back up your data. It sounds like a lot, but it's really just about developing good habits and thinking before you click, right?
Yeah, it's about being mindful of your digital footprint and taking ownership of your online security.
Yeah.
It's not about living in fear. It's about being informed and empowered.
Absolutely. Cybersecurity is a journey, not a destination. It's something we need to be constantly learning about and adapting to.
I couldn't agree more. And as always, the best defense is a good offense. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and never stop learning.
Well said. And on that note, we wrap up another deep dive into the world of cybersecurity. We've covered a lot of ground, from government vulnerabilities to the rise of AI and everything in between.
It's been quite a ride. Hopefully, we've provided you with some valuable insights and practical tips to help you stay safe in this ever-evolving digital landscape.
Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and stay ahead of the curve.